My name is Eric Grubaugh. I am here today with Sonny Spencer. Sonny, thanks for joining me. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you again, Eric. How are things?
They're going well. Salto has kindly invited both of us here to discuss happiness and job satisfaction in a NetSuite career. So, Sonny, before we get into that, I thought we'd start with just some really quick introductions to ourselves. Uh, Feel free to go first.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So, hi, everyone. My name is Sonny Spencer. I'm Director of Finance Operations with Viva Systems. I've been in the NetSuite ecosystem for, geez, close to like coming up on 15 years now. I used to use the 10 years as a landmark, but closer to 15 at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with NetSuite in many different capacities, as an admin, overseeing a team of devs and admins, and now really overseeing more financial transformation efforts in my role at Viva. I'm certified admin, solution consultant, and have had the privilege of speaking at SuiteWorld twice. So know a lot about the NetSuite
Right.
ecosystem and glad to speak to you today.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm Eric. I have made a career out of NetSuite development for the last 13 years, so I am also creeping up on that 15-year mark. Currently, I own and operate Stoic Software, where I consult with NetSuite development teams to help them run more effective, efficient, and enjoyable operations relevant for today. And I also want to introduce Salto, since they are the ones graciously hosting us today. Salto is not a consulting company looking to sell you any services. They are a software company that has built a powerful DevOps platform for business application teams to plan, review, deploy, and monitor changes to those business platforms. It supports NetSuite, Salesforce, Zendesk, Jira, and a whole bunch of other platforms. And you can check it out for yourself for free at salto.io. There's a free 30-day trial there. And I think that's all there. A little bit of housekeeping in terms of this session. This session is being recorded. It will be distributed out to everyone via email. It will also be posted to Salto's YouTube channel, I believe, afterwards. We have scheduled a full hour for this, but we are reserving plenty of that time to answer your questions and your comments in the chat. The Q&A is open. I'll be keeping an eye on both the chat and the Q&A. So if you have a question for Sonny or myself as we go, drop that in the Q&A. If you just have comments, conversations you want to have, drop that in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on both and bring that into the conversation where it fits. I also believe, Eric, there is an opening poll that you wanted to submit. So keep an eye out for the poll in Zoom. And with that, I think we're ready to get into the topic. So, Sonny, when we talk about happiness at work or job satisfaction, what are we talking about? Let's define the scope here.
Yeah, it's a great question, Eric. And for me, I think there's many different ways that you can frame this. I think for me, ultimately, it comes down to, your ability to make a real impact on an organization. When people look back at their careers, it's what impact did I have? What difference did I make? And it's funny, as I was preparing for our discussion today, I came across a framework that I think defines like what I'm talking about, impact, as kind of the environment that you work in as a multiple of the skill set, that the things that you have control over. And that framework, it really defined environment as, the things external to your control. So your manager, the resources that you have available to you, your compensation, the culture of the company. And then you layer in the skills, so the things that are within your control. Um, how you communicate with the business, your influence, your ability to execute well. So I think for me today, as we embark on this journey of happiness as NetSuite professionals, I want to keep in mind those kind of external factors that play kind of a key role in empowering you in your position, but also kind of internalizing where you have control over your own destiny or control over your own happiness. So I'm hoping we'll touch on those points today.
I think we definitely will. Um, what are some of those principles? Where where's the best place for you to kick this off?
Yeah, I think, tangentially related, to that idea of purpose. Well, it is exactly that, finding that purpose in what you do. So seeing the value in your day-to-day work as a NetSuite professional, and not just looking at what's in front of you. What I like to remind myself of, Eric, is we implement a new system, a new process, an enhancement. Sure, that's going to have an impact on the users today, but think about the users in 3, 5, 10 years' time that are going to benefit. That value for me compounds over time. And I think as NetSuite professionals, we're always kind of bouncing from project to project, or let's face it, fire to fire sometimes. I think we can all resonate with that.
Yeah.
You lose sight of that bigger picture and that purpose that you're making an impact today, but you're also making an impact that compounds over time. And I think it's good to remind ourselves of that as it relates to happiness in the workplace. What would you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think one of the things in there, when we talk about fighting fires, I think, first of all, I totally agree. Like recognizing, acknowledging, feeling the impact that you make. Uh, I think in any job, doesn't matter if you do a NetSuite or at all, just being able to observe, acknowledge, and celebrate the impact that you make is huge. Goes a long way to improving your job satisfaction, your quality of life, your quality of work life, shall we say. And the other thing in there, you talk about fighting fires, pacing, I think, is something really important and something, especially I see it less with end users. Not, it's not that I don't see it there, but I see this way more with the consulting firms. The pace is just relentless. Sometimes it's fire after fire after fire after fire for weeks, months on end. And maybe it just never stops. That pacing as an organization, being able to get a hold of that pacing so that we have more ebbs and flows, so that we're not just constantly redlining our pace, uh, is really really important. That's something that's not exactly in the control or not always in control of the individual contributor. Something at the organizational level that we really need to get a handle on. Sometimes you have individual contributors who redline on purpose. They'll take all the work that's available, and that's that's their choice. But I think one really key foundation, I suppose, of a happy, content workplace is, yeah, not throttling, not running at full throttle all the time. There's definitely situations where that's appropriate, and there's situations where it's not. Where we want this more consistent, even. What do I want to say? Like calm in our work pace. We don't always need to be frantically running about.
No, I agree, and I like that you mentioned like ebbs and flows because I think that's important as
Yeah.
well. Like if you're working in the NetSuite industry, it's more likely to be ebbs and flows than it is to be a state of calmness, in my experience, Eric.
Mhm.
And I think as long as there are those flows and you're not just constantly at full throttle, um, you strike that balance that there's happiness there, there's satisfaction, there's that purpose that you're making a difference, and you're not just trying to push solutions out as quickly as possible. Because let's face it, when it comes to NetSuite, there's often many different ways to skin the cat.
Oh yeah.
And there's the quick and dirty approach that you can take. Sometimes it gets the job done, but then you're not setting, you don't feel good about that because you know you can do better. You know that as organizations want to scale, do more with less, sure, that might be the right band-aid now, and that's all you have time for. but you would get more satisfaction out of taking a step back, taking the time to build a solution that's going to last and endure with that NetSuite environment. And, I would encourage people when they're in that situation to raise their hand and call it out. And sometimes, there's going to be a decision made where the band-aid approach is the right approach for that situation. But I'm willing to bet more often than not, whether it's a client, whether it's your manager, whether it's any stakeholder, they would be willing to listen and then consider the trade-off of the short-term fix versus the long-term value. And I think as NetSuite professionals, if we have more of those conversations, we're going to get that coming back to finding purpose, just that purpose, that satisfaction in what we do. I think that's something people should think about more.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one dovetail here, I guess, it's hard to acknowledge, or celebrate, or raise concerns or whatever it is without people around you, without community, some sort of community, whatever that might be. Uh, I think that goes a long way as well. Having a trusted, shared community working towards the same goal. Maybe that's your immediate team, the people you work with, your coworkers, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's other people of your peers at other companies, other admins, other developers, whatever your role might be. Finding and building and nurturing that community around you, building that support system, if you will. A good place to go vent sometimes, to commiserate, but also to get inspiration, bring in new ideas from elsewhere that can help in your current role, whether it's your efficiency or your we I don't know.
Yeah,
So
I just
how
want to
for you?
I just want to
Where do
add to
you
that,
go to
Eric.
find that community? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. You beat me to the punch there, Eric. For me,
Nailed it.
and because I'm excited about it, I see a really strong community within NetSuite. I've just actively engaged professionals that want to do the right thing and want to help. More than any other application that I've worked with and supported, there is just this energy and excitement in the NetSuite industry. And I love that many experts out there are always willing to lend an ear or offer a suggestion, whether you're a new user or an expert. There's always someone that you can bounce ideas off of. And there's numerous platforms out there. You look at like NetSuite Professionals, it's a great kind of Q&A option. If you haven't built that kind of internal community, whether within your company or with peers in the industry, a great way to get insights there through that platform. I also love, you know, I come back to Sweet World. So for me, I've had the privilege of attending, I think 5 Sweet Worlds now. Just the ability to connect with people in person, maybe people that I've seen posting on LinkedIn or have shared blogs and articles in the NetSuite space, being able to connect just on that human level has just been huge. And then you build that relationship, you build that trusted community that you can lean on over time. You know, I even saw recently, Eric, I don't know if you saw this, people are now hosting like NetSuite quiz nights in certain locations, and there's just this buzz and energy around NetSuite right now that I would, if I wasn't kind of in the remote corner in the Pacific Northwest, I would be definitely taking advantage of some of these opportunities. So I would encourage people to look out for those as well. There's a big community out there that's very accepting and welcoming.
Yeah, absolutely. Sweet World certainly a great place, but that only comes once a year for a few days. What other resources have you found to build that community?
The resources, I
Yeah, places where you see, you're mentioning there's a lot of energy.
honest,
Where are
yeah,
you observing that energy?
generally social media. So whether that's your
Sure.
LinkedIn, your Reddit, your Facebook, to my surprise, there's a lot of activity there with people just sharing. And I love that. that people are willing to listen, offer their advice, share best practices,
Yeah.
and you can get real-time feedback from people that have walked the walk. It's just for me a unique place because not every software out there does a good job of that. Sometimes you're just off to fend for yourself. And
Hmm.
what I love about NetSuite for me, Eric, is NetSuite does their own things for sure, but there's this just kind of organic energy. There are just engaged professionals willing to help, looking to grow, kind of ties into like a growth mindset. I see a lot of people that gravitate to NetSuite have that growth mindset and want to grow and improve and continue to learn. So it's just that's the community that's evolved over time.
We're gonna dig into the growth mindset, but first, I
Yeah.
have a couple more resources to add. Roy here has beat me to the punch in the chat, but NetSuite user groups, one amazing place certainly to build and grow that network, and I'm seeing a lot more of those crop up. There used to be half a dozen, now there are several dozen. Uh, there I'm seeing new. I feel like I see a new one every week or every month maybe on LinkedIn. There's a new city or a new
Yeah.
region popping up in NetSuite user group. Definitely recommend checking those out if you have one local. That's a great way to meet peers. It's a great way to network and find, you know, jobs, and grow your network and your skills at the same time. So definitely check those out. Also, the free NetSuite Professional Slack channel. That's a great place to go. Tons, I mean, like 14,000 members or something like that. Last I checked. So it's growing all the time. And it wasn't, I mean, you and I have been in the NetSuite space for long enough to remember it was not always this way. 10 years ago, NetSuite was not like this. It was very quiet, not a lot of sharing, not a lot of way fewer groups, way less public information available, less information to study, to learn, just less resources all around. But yeah, as the community has grown, more and more people are sharing, helping, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, as I think back, Eric, to when I started my NetSuite journey, I think your primary resources were NetSuite support and Suite answers. And obviously things have grown a lot since then.
Yeah,
They're still
a
great
whole lot.
resources for sure, but just the organic growth has just amazed me over the years. And that it's continued to grow. People are coming up with new ideas on how to engage, whether that's in person or remote. I love the momentum. I don't
Yeah,
see it slowing down.
I'll shift us to that growth mindset conversation in just a second. But there's a question from Kenneth here. Are there 3 to 5 people on LinkedIn that you think are worth following for NetSuite content or thought leadership?
Oh,
Doesn't have to be 3 to 5, but who on LinkedIn do you find worth following for NetSuite content?
that's a great question. I kind of hate to name names. There are some great people out there in the community.
Naming someone does not take away from someone else's name.
This is true. I
It's
mean,
not zero sum.
I will say this, that the first person that always comes to mind for me, because this person was kind of early into building engagement around NetSuite, is Marty Zigman. So a lot of people will
Or
subscribe to Marty's newsletter. I think he does an excellent job of breaking down like complex topics into non-technical nomenclature. For someone like me, that has been very beneficial over the past 10 plus years. So Marty and the work that he's doing really stands out. If you're not following him, that's one person. I see Tim's name in the chat. It's hard to, Tim's right there as well. Definitely a great person to follow, more so on that kind of technical side. Like if you're a
yeah.
NetSuite developer and you're not following Tim, make that happen. There's many great lessons there to learn. And Tim's just a great person as well, just a great human being, would
Mm-hmm.
always be willing to lend an ear. So it's people like Tim, um, like Marty, and there's many others, too many to name that are just have helped kind of pioneered this organic growth. Yeah, I
Yeah.
see Lauren's name as well. You guys are hitting on all the people that I would be calling out.
Yeah. Yeah, they are beating me to the punch. I was going to say Tim on the development side. He's great to follow, especially if you're into Sweet QL. He's always publishing about that stuff. If you're just a curious developer who wants to see wild stuff you can do in NetSuite, Tim Tim loves to sort of push the boundaries and try new things. Uh, Lauren is great. Lauren Palashik, Roy mentioned her in the chat. She's great to follow for, especially for more on the administrative side and the user group side, especially. She is very vocal about. She's a big advocate for the NetSuite user groups, especially down in Texas where she is. But follow her to find out all the latest on the regional NetSuite user groups. And I think one other I'll throw out there is Larisha Wynn. I hope I'm saying her first name right,
Yeah.
but she consults with CFOs a lot, and she has some really informative and really entertaining content a lot as well. Um, so also a great follow there. Um,
I see a certain Eric mentioned a few times as well there. So
Sometimes it's yeah, yeah. And I felt bad doing that, but thank you all for that as well. Um, okay, I think I will shift us to that. You mentioned growth mindset and that sort of continuous improvement aspect. I think there's more than just like what can I do as the individual, but let's start there. How can individuals in the NetSuite space, how do we adopt and yeah, how do we adopt that growth mindset and nurture it over time? What does that even mean?
yeah,
What does
I
that mean?
think it's an interesting one because that there could be an expectation that there's some onus on the organization to provide certain resources to make that happen. I look at it a little differently, Eric. For me, regardless of whether your organization supports NetSuite certification, NetSuite training, Suite World attendance, whatever that might be, there are so many resources and alternatives out there now that cost shouldn't be a deterrent from having that growth mindset and actually executing against it. There are great training materials out there, videos for free. I would say to everyone here, if you haven't checked out Salto Leap, it's a great free training platform. There's great courses on there that you should check out, and it comes with additional certifications are tied to some of those courses. And let's face it, just the basics of we just the new 2025.1 release, being ahead of the game when it comes to new releases, understanding how those changes are going to impact your organization and being proactive about it, right? Taking that to your leadership, to your stakeholders, and saying, hey, did you know X, Y, and Z? That in itself is going to help you. For me, Eric, it comes back to impact. You're going to have that bigger impact. You're going to make a difference at your organization and ultimately be happier because you've done that.
Yeah,
That's how I see it from like an individual perspective there, Eric.
I think I definitely agree. Sort of seeking out those sort of training opportunities. Certainly, certification is one of them, but not the only one. But just finding, sort of exploring and researching, finding those ways to improve your knowledge, increase your skill set, those sorts of things. Super important. There's always, I think, part of the growth mindset would be there's always room to grow. There is always room for improvement. So identifying those opportunities, consistently evaluating your own skill sets and mindset, looking for those opportunities for improvement is huge because mastery of a thing yields a lot of happiness, a lot of contentment at work, especially when you get to sort of show off that, uh, employ those skills that you're using. But I think there's more than just like seeking opportunities for learning. There's also reflection on the work, the actual deliverables that we make, whatever those might be, or we finish a project or whatever, taking some time to reflect on what didn't work, what did work. I think a lot of times we growth mindset, we talk about continuous improvement and we harp on the failures a lot, like identify the failures or not even failures, but what didn't go quite right or could have gone better. That's sort of the easy one, I guess. Those are usually more obvious or more glaring because they usually cause pain for someone, and that someone is going to shout about that pain. So those are usually more obvious, more easier to reflect on and fix for the future. Uh, but also in the successes, I think something we don't do often enough is evaluate the successes for how we can systematize that, how we can make that repeatable. How do we make those successes more consistent, more repeatable? How do we build systems around the things that we do best? Because we don't always. What's the saying? We don't rise to the level of our abilities. We fall to the level of our habits, or in the case of an organization, our systems. Um, so the more we can sort of enshrine those successes into systems, into habits, like organizational level systems and habits, the easier it becomes to have those successes and celebrate them, to sort of make those things repeatable, easier, rather than trying to dredge up like, oh, what did we do last time we got a similar request? Like trying to figure that out. Write it down and then build a system around it. If you aren't stopping, you aren't if you're never slowing down to do that reflection on either failures or successes, or going back to the pacing comment earlier, if you never slow down to reflect, it gets really hard to grow and improve, change. So make sure both on an individual level and an organizational level, you're building in time to slow down and to look back, to reflect. If you can't learn from history, you will repeat it.
No, I think that's right, Eric. And I'm really glad you brought it up a couple of times now around just celebrating the wins. And I think, this is where I kind of look to management and leadership as well to really take the time to recognize people in the way that they want to be recognized. Not everyone, likes to be recognized in person with a trophy. That's not for everyone. So really understand your people, understand the NetSuite professionals that you work with and how they want to be recognized and celebrated when they do something remarkable. Because I feel like given the platform that we all work on, the, you know, the capabilities are endless in terms of what you can build and customize for your organization. And I do think just in general, companies don't do the best job of taking a step back, taking the time to celebrate wins. I'll give you a very quick example. We had a big project that we launched end of last year, and it was like a month later, like we had to work through, support and what have you. But once we were able to take that deep breath and take a step back and reflect, we actually did like a mini award ceremony just to recognize people in a fun way. And I'm not saying that people should do that for every project that you launch, but there is a time and a place for it. And if you can make it fun, you know, for me that comes back to the happiness aspect. If you can make the work that you do fun and celebrate those wins, it's a win-win all around for the organization and for those individuals. So I'm really glad you brought it up, Eric. Like the celebrating wins that would be a key takeaway for me.
Yeah, I think extending what you said about getting to know your people, like acknowledge them in the way that they want to be acknowledged. Getting to know your people is maybe the most important job of a manager, um, and treating them the way they want to be treated, enabling, empowering them in the ways they want to be enabled and empowered. You can't do that if you don't get to know them, get to understand their personalities, because especially something like happiness, a very vague concept like that, it's it's going to be wildly different for each individual. Um, no two people are going to have exactly the same criteria. It's going to shift over time uh, as they move through different stages of life. Their requirements, their all of that's going to shift. So you can't just like set it and forget it to stay in touch with your people. Um,
Erica, I think that's a
and
great, like you mentioning like set and forget. Yeah, I just think when it comes to managing in the NetSuite world, that's just the last thing that you can do. It for me, it's kind of the opposite. How can you empower those individuals on your team to expand their role and push them and quite frankly, make them a little bit uncomfortable. If you're a NetSuite professional and you're comfortable in your day to day, maybe you're not being pushed hard enough to continue to explore that growth mindset. I think for me, one of the things I've appreciated earlier in my career was the ability to make mistakes and learn from them. And whether that's you have a sandbox right now and you can go and just test things, play with things, look at system performance issues, whatever that might be, take the time to do that. Have the freedom to give your team the freedom to make those mistakes and learn as they go. That's how your team's going to evolve and develop over time. For me, there's no such thing as kind of set and forget in the NetSuite realm.
I think talking about pushing people, um, I think that drifts nicely into like sort of role clarity a little bit because not everyone wants to be pushed. Again, not everyone wants to be pushed in the same ways, but they also don't all want to be pushed in the same direction.
Yeah.
Classic example, not all developers want to be managers, but often that's sort of the only progression they have, or they don't want to be architects, right? They want to write code. And as they get better at writing code, they want to write more code. They don't want to suddenly be put in front of customers to draw up technical design documents. They don't want to shift over to managing other developers. But those are often sort of the only two higher level career paths available. And that's not what everyone wants. So, both from an individual level, having clarity around what your role is and what the next role or roles available to you are, and what you need to do to get there is really important. But individuals can't make those up on behalf of their employer. So, the leadership running a team needs to have that clarity around the roles and responsibilities of all their employees. It might sound like a very basic, fundamental business thing, but very few teams I've seen, worked with, consulted with actually have in place that sort of career progression. Rarely is it in writing, rarely is it fleshed out to like requirements
Yeah.
and things like that.
And let me
Just
let me pick your
having that
brain on that.
clarity.
All right. Like because I think you raise a good point. I agree with everything you said. But then coming back to, individualization and knowing the person, I have found difficulty just personally sharing my experience, for helping kind of forge that path in a very kind of generic way. Like, hey, it's this, then this, then this. I feel like strong leadership and managers really work with the individual and kind of map that out. And a title can be one thing, but the work that you actually do and enjoy it and get happiness from can be something else. I think so often we're bound to titles, and really don't think that's the case. It should come back to your point to the underlying roles and responsibilities, and those should be crystal clear.
Mhm.
If someone's coming to your team with a support issue versus a project versus someone needs to write code, it should be very clear who on the team is responsible for that and when and SLAs and that sort of thing. If you don't have that, then you're setting the team up to fail.
Yeah, totally agree. What's next? What's a facet, an aspect, a first principle, whichever
Yeah.
descriptor you want to use? What's something we haven't discussed yet?
The only other thing that comes to mind that I touched on very briefly before, it is linked to growth mindset, but just more so that proactivity. So there will be times when you'll have some downtime and you can choose to procrastinate or do whatever you need to do. But I would love to see more NetSuite professionals, have the autonomy, go experiment in sandbox, find an issue. So don't wait for your end users to come to you with challenges, whether it's something slow, a script has failed, workflow's not executing correctly. Actually seek out those issues in advance. Like NetSuite has great audit trail information where you can get ahead of these things if you're looking in the right places. And I would love to see people be more proactive and come to the business with, hey, here's what I'm seeing. I've attempted to solution in a sandbox environment. Here are the things, here are our options. What we discussed earlier, do you want the band-aid solution or should we take a step back and think more holistically? I think that's a great way to make an impact on any organization. And within the NetSuite space specifically, you have your logs, you have NetSuite, application performance management. There are many different tools within NetSuite that are free to use that can help with that proactivity. And I think if an organization sees someone doing that, seeking out issues before they become problems, that's only going to help as we talk about like next steps in someone's career.
Yes. I want to come back to that real quick, but I also want to prompt the audience here. I'm looking at the poll results from initially. We have mostly eights, nines, and tens for how happy you are. I would love to
Wow.
see questions, comments about how you've achieved that high level of happiness. Like what are the habits that you do? What are the things you receive from your employer, perhaps? What are the aspects that have helped you build that level of happiness in your career? I'd love to see that in the chat. Let's
And
see.
just while we're waiting for feedback,
Yes.
Eric, I mean that's great. That's great to hear. And
Yeah.
I would like to say I'm surprised by that. I don't know that I am. Like generally speaking, I see happy, engaged professionals in the NetSuite community. Sure, you'll have people that don't like it. Maybe they weren't trained properly, just the user
Yeah.
adoption isn't there. But generally, it's a curious community with that growth mindset. So I'm glad to see that in the results. That's really good to see.
Yeah. Can we get into I don't know, maybe some other examples, more like concrete examples as we get into the final third of the hour here. Some specific examples of things you have seen or done that have either increased your own happiness, your team's happiness, whatever it might
Yeah, that's a good one. I think my head immediately goes back to what we were just discussing around role clarity. So I had the opportunity to build out a team during my time at Avalara, and really early on had made the conscious decision that we needed to think about not just the work that we were doing, but that role clarity in three buckets. We were going to have the folks that were going to be on the front lines with our end users, more from a support engagement perspective, folks that were very connected with those end users. And typically it was folks that had worked with the company a long time. So they knew everyone, they had great relationship, and they were just the right people for that role. Then our developers, we had very clear delineation between the folks that were writing code and those that were not. That one was a bit more straightforward. And then many different names for this, whether it's a business systems analyst or a project manager, a group that were focused on bigger, more kind of transformational initiatives. And what I've found other organizations do, they will try and create a hybrid role of two or three of those things. And it can truly be a mix of development work and project work, or project work with some support on the side. And I think you set the individuals up for success by providing that clarity um, from kind of the ground up. And of course, when people take vacation, people are out sick, people need to chip in where they can. And I think people are receptive to that, right? Everyone's always willing to help for the greater good. But if you provide that clarity from the get-go, not only do those individuals know what they're responsible for and what success looks like, but then your stakeholders know who they go to, who's their kind of first point of contact. And it just works. So we had a lot of success there, Eric, in just building out that team over a few years. That's definitely one that stands out.
Yeah. I think one thing I harp on, maybe get on my soapbox about a lot, is onboarding. Because the onboarding stage is critical in many ways. One, their first impression to a new employee, right? First, everybody knows all the sayings about first impressions, how important they are. That onboarding stage, when you hire a new employee and bring them into their team, into their role, that onboarding stage is massively critical to their success in your organization. And how you design your onboarding process also massively important to your the success of your organization because it forces you to decide. It forces you to know what kind of people you're looking for, who you're going to hire, which roles are they going to fill, what roles do we have available, what are those career paths like. Like you have to make so many decisions if you're going to design an effective onboarding process. Just like we want to get to know our individual people, we also need to get to know and to clearly define our organization. What is the culture? What is our modus operandi? How do we operate successfully? By forcing yourself to design an effective onboarding program, you force yourself to reflect on those things at an organizational level and design an onboarding process that will make the employees that you need, and try to randomly go find some person that you need. That's way harder, especially in a niche as still relatively small as NetSuite is. It's really hard to find the diamond in the rough, the perfect person. If you really know your organization and its needs and its goals, and how it achieves those goals, then you can make those employees rather than finding through onboarding and then continuous improvement thereafter. Funding opportunities for training, for network, for all that skill building type of stuff. Send your employees to SuiteWorld, that sort of thing, so that they can expand grow their skills.
And
Um,
Eric, I just want to chime in there.
yeah, please do.
One of the biggest success stories that I saw is you hit the nail on the head for me, was not an external hire. It was actually at this company at the time, someone that was in a different part of the organization, which showed a really strong interest in NetSuite, had been proactive, had shown that growth mindset, had done some kind of training to the side, even though that wasn't part of their role within the organization. We sat down, we had a conversation, and there was an opening on the team, and it became a no-brainer to give that person a shot. They became one of the most successful employees that I've worked with. And so it can happen organically within an organization. It doesn't always have to be that diamond in the rough somewhere, across the globe. It can be someone very close to home that shows that interest. And you
Yeah,
mentioned that kind of NetSuite being that niche area that I think it still is. And the one other point I wanted to make, Eric, is around, we talk about happiness. The one thing that we haven't touched on yet is that equity, that compensation that, let's face it, is inherently tied to happiness for many people. It's just the reality. And
yeah,
with NetSuite being niche, there's, a general expectation that professionals in this area command like higher compensation compared to others kind of in a dev or business analyst role, more generic. The NetSuite space is more niche, very kind of specialized skill set. And in fact, I think there was a salary survey recently. I think it was Salto that put it out there. I haven't had a chance to look at that, but I would encourage folks to look at that as well because that's going to help them make informed decisions and either support and support that happiness in their current organization or lead them to questions that they need to answer um, that will, in the long term promote their own happiness.
Yeah, maybe I need to uh, check my privilege here. But yeah, we kind of glossed over salary, income, that sort of thing. That is sort of the basic. Uh, that's why most people engage in work to meet their basic needs. If you're not able to feed yourself, your family, put a roof over your head, your family, it doesn't matter how many training opportunities you have or how much you reflect on your successes and failures. You're going to be constantly focused on those very fundamental basic needs. So if you are not receiving that for some reason, or if you're the organization and not providing that for some reason, you have to fix that before you fix anything else. Because that first tier of Maslow's hierarchy, I know it's not a perfect model of life, but we talk about it a lot, so it's pretty common knowledge. But if you're not meeting that first tier, that second tier, nothing else above that matters. You have to meet those needs in order, uh, or it doesn't matter how many pool tables you have, or ping pong tables, or free lunches, or whatever. None of that matters. You have to be able to meet those fundamental human needs first, and our society has decided work is the way that we do that. So
Yeah, completely agree. We
yeah,
have
it
to
should
get the
always
basics right.
be from the individual side, know what you're worth, know what kind of salary you can command, what sort of benefits are available, and things like this salary report. I know there's few other companies that do similar things. Doing that level of research, understanding what is appropriate for your region, for your role, that sort of thing, and making sure that you are getting that, being an advocate for yourself. And if you're not receiving that, not able to have that conversation, then start looking elsewhere, I would say. And if you're the organization and not providing that, know the market value for all the roles that you have and pay accordingly. You, it's this information is readily available for the most part, and you can set your compensation package appropriately to plan. None of this is news. I don't think these are all things that an organization should be doing. It shouldn't be like a surprise how much a developer might cost, for instance, or an admin. You should be able to know and research, plan around those investments.
Completely agree, Eric. Do we want to take a look at the Q&A at all? I'm not sure if anything has come through there.
Yeah, I've been watching. There's a few comments in here. One that I think dovetailing with the onboarding, mentorship, uh, kind of couple like pairs up the onboarding and the community aspect. Mentorship is massive, uh, especially in development. I think maybe in any role, but especially in development, something that's like sort of a craft, if you will. Having a mentor is way more important than having a book or a set of instructions to follow through onboarding. Having a mentor, someone like, and not just saying like, yeah, go ask the senior developers if you get stuck, but having an actual like signed, dedicated mentor um, is incredible, absolutely incredible for the the development of your employees. So it's another area I work with teams on is building mentorship programs, actually, formalizing that process rather than kind of ad hoc. Oh, you're going to spend your first day with that person, your second day with that person. They're just going to dump their whole brain into yours, drinking from the fire hose.
Eric, I
So,
don't know that I
yeah.
knew that. I'm interested to know.
Mhm.
Do you ever recommend mentorship with individuals outside of the NetSuite community? An example would be someone else within the organization that perhaps knows the business very well, someone that you could learn how the business operates and where the business growth plans and that sort of thing as then an input, a learning into what you're doing in your day to day and how it supports those efforts. Is that something that you would encourage, or do you generally kind of keep it within that NetSuite world?
Both. Yes to both. Yes. Yes is the answer. They're both fantastic. I think that now we're getting back to like knowing your people or knowing yourself and knowing where you want to take your career. If I'm a developer, sort of by convenience, because that's what I'm good at, but I really want to move into, I don't know, maybe I want to move into sales or I want to move into that sales engineer, that technical architect role. I'm gonna need to know a lot more about the business. So yeah, in that case, I want a mentor in the businesses I'm targeting. Uh,
Absolutely.
I need that more so than I need a coding mentor, because long term, it's not really the craft that I am uh, practicing. But so I think it totally depends on where you want to go, or as what mentors you choose. But I think regardless, I think it's something really important for companies to formalize to and enable their employees to engage in this mentorship program. And as an individual, yeah, if your company doesn't have that, most don't, but finding mentors, even outside your company, for the craft that you want to develop, I think is one of the most important things you can do for your own.
I couldn't agree more. Thanks for sharing that, Eric.
See, I think we have one more, a closing poll to share here as we near our time. If you have any questions or comments out there in the audience, now is the time. Looks like the ending poll is up. Please give that a quick answer. Sonny, any closing remarks?
I think we've covered a lot in the session today, Eric. I think for me, where I stay grounded, in my career and my own happiness is control what you can control. You have a responsibility for your own happiness. Yes, that there are those kind of environment factors that we touched on at the beginning, where you do need support from your organization, from your manager, the tools that you need to do your job. But there's so much that you can do with a growth mindset, being proactive, all of the things that we discussed today that will contribute to your own happiness over time. Sometimes it's just getting started and making that happen. And if you are having troubles with that environmental side, you don't have role clarity, you're not getting access to the things that you need, have that conversation with your leader, with your manager. More often than not, it's going to lead to good things down the road. So be transparent, have those conversations. But in all honesty, Eric, just from the results we saw from the initial poll, it sounds like that isn't a challenge for a lot of people here today, which is fantastic. But that doesn't mean we should slow down or shouldn't continue that growth mindset and proactivity as
Mhm.
NetSuite professionals.
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the control what you can control. And I think my closing remark would be to shift that to the leadership level, the organizational level. You also have controls, uh, and the actions that you take have a more amplified effect. An individual might control their own happiness, but at the organizational level, your role, much like the role of a noble government, is to establish, maintain, and improve the minimum quality of life for your employee. So the actions you take sort of set that lowest bar, and then it's up to the employee to achieve the higher bars. But you, as the organization, as the leaders, can constantly be setting that sort of minimum bar of quality of life, of happiness for your employees. The actions you take, the processes you decide, the culture you build has an outsized impact, either positive or negative, on the happiness of your employees. And not every employee will be a great fit long term for where you're trying to take your organization. That's okay, that's normal, but you want that to be the exception, not the rule. All right. I think it's going to bring us to a close. I don't see any more Q&A. I don't see any more comments. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Sonny, thank you for joining me, having this conversation. Thanks, Salto, for hosting us. Once again, you can check out salto.io for a free 30-day trial. And I think that will sign off. Thank you so much, Sonny.
Thank you, Eric. Always a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye now.